Hi, welcome to Tandem's author interview series. I'm so excited to have everyone here for April's interview. It's Poetry Month, which makes it especially fitting that we have Alexandria Giardino, who wrote this amazing book, which is about a poet. So this is really kind of an awesome fit for this month. So we're so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is super fun.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. So The first question I have is, when did you begin expressing yourself creatively?
I don't even remember. I think I've always been expressing myself creatively. I think that's what kids do. I think that's what play is. And I was thinking about this question and reflecting on how so much of my life is about creative expression, whether it's painting a wall in a house or writing a story. It goes deep.
Yeah.
There's no first memory of it. It's from the beginning.
Right. That's awesome. So I understand there's no exact moment where you remember being expressing yourself creatively. But is there a moment that you remember being inspired to become a writer?
So I remember that I loved stories, and starting in kindergarten, my most vivid memories of school are being read to by our teacher. That was the best part of the day, and being read to by the other adults in my life.
Right.
So I think that I just wanted to create that experience. I wanted to write stories that other people would read from a pretty young age. My first book I wrote in kindergarten. And I actually have it still. So that, I must have been about 5 when I decided to write.
That's awesome. So now you're an adult and you've actually written a book and you have experienced that whole process. So what is that process like?
To write a book?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It starts with inspiration. It's always a moment. It's magic. There's just a moment when an idea comes to your mind and you think, that's a story. That will be a story. Recently I read an article about coyotes living in big cities, and it was a moment of, that will be a story. And then the hard work begins. Because it's a 500-word story.
Right.
It's poetry at the same time. So it takes so much effort to write that story. Ode to an Onion took about 2 years.
Wow.
And I always tell kids, I wrote 500 words in 2 years. And they love that because they understand that means a lot of hard work and revision.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. I remember when I was a kid thinking these books, they're so short, so it must be people just write them every day. They must be very easy. It's just funny to think about how long it can take to make something that seems so simple, but also is so beautiful. It's really fascinating.
It's an incredible process. There's that moment of inspiration. Then there's the first draft, and you always think, this is amazing. My first draft is so good, and it's really terrible. It almost always really bad. But you have to save them because you want to go back and laugh. But then the process at 2 years is really always revision.
Right.
And without a writing community, without my fellow writers who give me feedback, I would be lost. So I really want to acknowledge that is a key part of the process is community. That writing, it's lonely when you're doing it by yourself, but it's actually it's an act of communication and connection, always.
Right.
So for me, that's the process, is the connection.
Awesome.
It's like E.M. Forster, always connect.
Right.
And I think writers want to connect. I think that's our primary drive, is a desire for human connection.
Awesome. Well, I see that Emily really likes when we talk about the writing process, so it's great because we're going to keep talking about it.
Great.
What is the hardest part of writing a book?
Oh boy, the hardest part for me is knowing when it's done. I actually love revision, and my critique partners laugh because I'm like a dog on a bone. I will rewrite, and I love it. I tweak. It's part of the translation that I do. I know we're going to get to talk about that in a bit. But I'm a wordsmith, so that part's fun. The hard part is this done? Is it good enough? Is it ready to share in a kind of professional way? Boy, is that hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it is and it's not.
Right.
And then I'm really upset.
Yeah, well, that's fair. So then the other question is, I'm not going to ask what the easiest part is, but I'm going to ask what the best part of writing a book is.
Oh, well, I've written books for adults and I have translations out. So for me, I had a different answer for that type of writing. The best part of writing a picture book is when I see the artwork that an illustrator has done. I just got to see the artwork for a book I have coming out next year, and called Me Plus Tree. And the illustrators are sisters from Italy, and the work is so beautiful and so unexpected. It's not what I imagined when I was writing the book. So for me, by far, the best part of picture book writing is that moment when my co-creators share their vision, and we have made something together. If I could do that every day, that would be the best.
That's
it's
beautiful.
Really special. Yeah.
Well, I see we have a question that just came in from Caitlin, who's asking about how do you connect with an illustrator? Is that your choice, or is it determined by a publisher?
Great questions, Caitlin. So it's determined by the publisher, but I work with publishers that have been very generous and encouraging and inviting me into that process of finding the right illustrator for a book. So I have four total picture books, one that I translated, and each illustrator was found by the editors at the publishing companies that they brought to me, and I loved the work, and they're all distinct. So that's what it's like when you're an author. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be an author illustrator. I think that would be cool, but I can't even do a good stick figure.
That's fair. I mean, neither can I.
was say, it's a good thing we find illustrators for my books.
And the illustrator that you have for this book is, I mean, these are spectacular.
Isn't she amazing?
So beautiful.
Felicita she's a superstar. She's a rock star. I haven't met her yet. This is a thing about working with illustrators, is that I want to meet them. I want to hug them after I see their work. And Felicita lives in Rome, so I'm going to have to travel, unfortunately for me, to Rome to give her a hug. But we've had a really nice relationship by email, and I sent her a copy of the book signed with a letter. When I saw her work, my heart just exploded. And I sent her a letter saying that we had created this thing together for our children, our grandchildren, that this was something that it was a gift she gave me, and I really wanted to thank her for that.
So we've touched on it a little bit, but in addition to being a writer, you're also a translator.
Yes.
You translate Spanish to English?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly Spanish to English.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is that process like? It must be totally different than writing your own.
It is completely different. So, and then in some ways it's similar, actually. So the first thing that you do is you have to really carefully read the story and have a deep understanding of what the writer was trying to accomplish. And then there's this first pass. It's just like a first draft, and it usually is pretty bad. But you have to get something out in your language, and then it's all about wordsmith and playing with sound. And the translation I did for a picture book for kids was into Spanish from English. And I had to learn all this baseball vocabulary. So a lot of it is about building vocabulary. It's playing with the thesaurus, in some ways, to get just the right word.
Right.
And then it becomes your own book. So translation is, in a way, also co-creation, right? It started as something, and when it comes into another language, it is something else.
Right.
Entirely, really.
Right.
So yeah, and I think that maybe that's why I like picture book writing too,
right?
That's like tweaking one word at a time.
Yeah, awesome. So since we've sort of already been talking about it, let's actually talk about it. Okay. So this book, Ode to an Onion, it's inspired by the relationship between Pablo Neruda and his muse Matilde, and his wife. That's right. Yeah. So why did you pick this relationship to write about?
Well, I had been working on a documentary about Pablo in Chile, and that gave me access to his home at Isla Negra. And I was wandering around the property there one day by myself. The film crew was somewhere else on the property. And Pablo he's such an outsized figure, and the space is all him. And I wondered, where was Matilde? She lived here too. Where was she? How did she fit in? And I wanted to know her. I really wanted to know her. So I found her memoir, and I translated it into English so that her story would be known to English readers. And in that translation, she describes the garden from her childhood, and it's whimsical. It was such a wonderful space, and I thought that would be a place to tell a children's story, where the garlic and the roses were in love with each other, and a lot of the kind of poetic images of my book are really hers.
Right.
And for me, even though the book features Pablo,
Right.
it's really about Matilde. For me, it's my tribute to her.
Right.
And so that's how it came to be.
Right. I mean, it's a great choice too. I mean, a garden, like, even if kids have no idea who Pablo Neruda is, they know vegetables, they know things that grow in a garden. It's a great way to have those conversations about what a garden is and how all those pieces make a beautiful garden.
Right.
It's really exciting.
Right. Oh, thank you.
So then, if I ask why you picked that relationship, I also have to ask, why did you pick that particular poem? He was a pretty prolific poet, so there's a lot out there. Why this poem instead of any other poem?
It's true. He has written, volumes, right?
Yeah.
And I love so much of his poetry that's really very mature.
Yeah.
So the first pass was, it has to be a poem that the child could relate to.
Right.
And even the odes, they were meant to be simple, but they're quite sophisticated. So, but I did go into the odes, and I wanted to find something a little silly and playful. So, ode to socks, ode to fish, kids would love that. And then I saw the ode to the onion, and I thought, that's surprising. So it's kind of silly and surprising, right? And I thought, I bet kids would be curious about why you would celebrate an onion. Like, they're an odd choice, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I decided.
Yeah. And it's great. I even love the way this book is printed. It's one of the things I found really exciting about it is when you open the book, the first page is this vellum, so it looks like an onion skin, which I thought was really cool. And I also think is fun because if a kid knows what an onion is, then they kind of have onion skin. It says like an onion skin. I just think it's really cool.
Wasn't that clever?
It was really smart.
I know. It's a collaboration.
Yeah.
I can only take credit for the story, but then you think about it's like a film or something.
Yeah.
That piece of beauty was Melissa's, and that piece of, and it's
Right.
It was a surprise to me too.
Yeah, it's such a good idea. I really like it.
I know. Thank you, Melissa.
And since it's Poetry Month and we're a children's book organization, I thought I'd ask you, do you think it's important to teach children about poetry?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. I couldn't say no to that.
Fair.
Right? Fair
Yeah.
enough. But how do we do it?
Right.
I think most people would agree that we should teach poetry to children, and there are great programs for poets in schools and so on. The trick is how, and how to make poetry fun. I mean, I think there's this idea that poetry isn't fun, or it's so serious, or it's too hard. And the great thing about odes is that I go into schools and I tell kids what I think is true, which is an ode is a party. It's the way a poet throws a party. It's a celebration. And with that, it sort of frees kids up to have fun. So we do a lot of ode writing when I visit schools. We just did an event at a school in Berkeley where we wrote odes to radishes. And the poems were awesome.
Right.
But I think that poetry has to be fun.
Right.
And the other thing is that, and so game playing, word playing, active movement that, encourages kids to think that they're having fun and make sure they are having fun. And also, they already know poetry.
Right.
They know it. It's deep in all of us. It's music. And so sometimes I start by talking about just song lyrics. Do you like music? Then you like poetry. And that it's just making sure that it's accessible to everybody.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I see we have another question from Emily this time. Are there other poems or poets that you might want to write a children's book about?
Oh, good question. I can't think of any off the top of my head, to be honest. My mind is so into some other projects I'm working on right now. So not at the moment.
Who knows what the future holds?
Who knows what the future holds? I have another book coming out next year about a musician, and it's called The Good Song. A very similar kind of story, but about how a singer came to sing a song.
Awesome.
We'll see about poetry in the future.
Awesome. And then I also see there's another question. I can't quite read the whole question, but I think Emily's asking, who are a few of your favorite poets?
Oh, well, Audrey and Rich. I mean, right off the bat. And Mary Oliver. If I could do another picture book that involved poetry, it would probably be something by Mary Oliver.
Just all those great dog poems.
Oh, she has so many poems. I have them actually around in my home. I have text lines. There's a bunch of her poetry on my wall. Wild Geese. So those are two that come to mind right away.
Awesome. So what do you think is the value of storytelling with young children?
Well, I know that we often say in response to that question, it's about making sense, making order out of the world, developing a relationship with characters and plot. But for me, I have a little bit of a political sensibility I'm going to be honest with you about. I really feel strongly that when we tell stories, when we hear stories, when we're readers of other people's stories, we are developing empathy, and we're also developing our own creativity. And I think we desperately need those more than ever. I think with the climate crisis that's coming, that our children are going to live in a different world, and I think they need to be so creative, whether they're engineers or outside of the arts, right? They need a sense of creativity and empathy to solve the problems that they're going to face. So I do have this sort of underlying agenda that my books for children will encourage them to be inspired and creative, because I think they're going to need it.
That's beautiful. So then how do we make, when we're telling our stories with books, how do we make them engaging? What makes a book or a story powerful and engaging for children or for anyone?
Authenticity, a real feeling. I think kids have a really good BS detector. I mean, a book can be really fun and playful. I love playful books, rhyming books. There's a lot of space for that, just to be fun and silly. But I think even that's authentic. I think when a book is silly and for real, kids will love that. But I don't know, for myself as a reader, I love a book when I feel like there's real emotion. It doesn't have to be my experienced emotion though, right? Like when you think about own voices and stories that are told from different points of view, that's so important. So I sort of wrestle with relatability. When somebody says the book has to be relatable to every child, I kind of disagree with that. I think it can be relatable to some kids, but if it has an authentic feeling that a child can learn from, then maybe that's the bigger human relatability, right? Yeah. So I want authentic stories.
That's awesome. And I see someone who's on here, Paula, is shouting at empathy and kindness, which I think are so valuable in children's books.
Yes. Yeah. If a reviewer used those two words in a review of my book, I would say my job is done. I did a good job, because we don't have enough kindness. We really, people, kids aren't mean, adults are mean. Kids can be kind of cruel, but there's a lack of kindness in the world. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Paula.
So what advice would you give to young children who want to grow up to be authors or poets, or if you don't have advice for that, or maybe both,
or translators,
Oh, there's so many things you can give advice about.
There's so many cool things you can do.
Or what advice were you given that you found particularly helpful in any path in writing or translating?
Oh my gosh. So I thought about this question, and I don't think I've ever received any advice as a kid for being a writer. It's really kind of amazing. I think I just said, I'm doing this. But I do have advice to pass along. I hope it's good advice. And that is, when I'm meeting with kids in schools, I try to make eye contact with kids, and I try to individually connect with them and let them know that they can do this, that they can, in 30 years, be where I am. And so that's the advice, is to believe in themselves. Because so often I think kids don't. And so that's it. Just the human contact, the eye contact, which means sincerity. And to say to them, I believe you can be here. You can do this. And so many times kids have come up to me after a presentation when I've made eye contact with them in the audience or the classroom, and they say to me, I am going to be a writer. And I just want to cry when it's so profound. So that's my advice.
Beautiful.
Everybody knows to work hard already, right? That's easy.
Well, since we're talking about children, I actually mentioned before we started this interview, but yesterday morning I was at one of the schools that I work with in San Francisco at Commodore Stockton, and I was visiting with one of the classes that right now is doing a project. They're learning about books and how books are made, and they have a lot of questions about books. And so I actually got some of those questions to bring to you.
I love it.
So one of the students, Valerie, she wants to know, what kind of books do you like to read?
I like nonfiction a lot. I love biographies. I love, love, love The Poet X right now. So I'm reading that. If you haven't read that, go read that. It's amazing. But I'm a big nonfiction reader. And it's changed over the years. There are long periods of time in my life where I loved reading poetry mostly or fiction. But I love a good biography. You know, just somebody's life, what they accomplished. That's where I'm at these days.
I mean, it makes sense given that you wrote about two real people.
Exactly. Right.
And then another student, Jiao Wen, he wanted to know, why should we read so many books?
Right. Okay. Well, I would have smiled at him and said, "They're short. You can read a lot very quickly." You know, reading. Follow your interests. Read a lot that you're interested in. So I'm not really saying why. I'm encouraging them to read a lot of what they want to read about, because kids have interests. My kid is into mountain bikes. He can read all the books he wants about mountain bikes. He can go for it. It's about curiosity.
Right.
You know, pursuing what your curiosity is.
Yeah.
So why? Because you're curious and because you want to know things.
Right.
So go find out.
And there are so many books out there about so many different topics. If you're curious about something, there's going to be a million books for that thing.
Exactly. The library's full.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's a good time to shout out to anybody who's watching. Go to your library and take your young children there and let them pick out some books. I definitely did that a lot when I was a kid. Was just like loading up my bag with books and then going home and reading a lot. Maybe overcommitting sometimes and having some late fees, but you know.
Joe, I have a late fee right now.
Yeah. As an adult, the same.
That's what Tandem does too. The bag of books.
Yes.
You know, bringing home the books. Like even if it's a big stack and you don't read all of it, what a great feeling.
Yeah.
That you can have those books and share those books. Other people's hands have been on those books. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
You know?
And it's great for the children. You know, we work with are very young. Reading with their parents is such a nice experience. And then the children who have questions, because children are curious and they have a lot of questions. Getting to talk about the things they see in those books and have questions about those and talking to their parents about it is really exciting.
And wouldn't that be cool for them to follow those questions to more books?
Yeah.
I want to know more about more trucks.
Right.
My son wanted to know a lot about trucks. Right?
Right.
And to follow that thread. There are books out, book after book after book that you can follow.
Yeah, that's true. So I have one more question for you before we go. And it's a question we end pretty much all of our interviews with.
Okay.
So at Tandem, we are a big fan of children's books. And so we have to ask every author, every illustrator that we interview, what is your favorite children's book? And if you can't pick just one, 5 or 20, there's a lot out there.
I know, it's so great. So I have a favorite. I'm going to hold it up. Can you guys see that? Mr. Pine's Purple House. This is my all-time favorite. And but that doesn't mean I don't love a bunch of other books. I could probably recite Where the Wild Things Are. I've studied that book. As a writer, I study other books, and sometimes I'll rewrite them so that I can really deeply understand the beats and the structure and the character development. And Where the Wild Things Are is just perfect in so many narrative ways.
Right.
But this book, Mr. Pine's Purple House, it kind of comes back around to our first question of my earliest memories of being creative. So Mr. Pine's story is about this man who lives on a block where all the houses look the same, uniform. And he decides that he wants to have something unique. So he plants a little bush in his front yard. And his neighbors pass by and they admire it. And the next day, they all have a bush in their front yard. And so it goes. He adds a tree, he does this and that. And he's getting very frustrated because everybody's copying him. And so he finally decides to paint his house purple. And he's pretty sure nobody else will do that. So he's out there painting in a beautiful purple color. I love purple. And the next day, when he wakes up, all the houses along the block are different colors. There's a green house, a gold house, a red house. It's beautiful. And for me, that message meant so much to me, just to be yourself and to really persist in your uniqueness and your own creativity, and that would inspire other people to do the same thing. And also, such a 60s book. Such a 60s book. The kind of spirit of that time. But also I felt that, in the end, this book for me was just about who read it to me. One of my earliest memories in my life is sitting in the lap of a family friend, and she was reading this book to me. And the physical memory of that is so profound. And so this book meant more emotionally too than just the message of it.
Awesome. I think it's a memory that a lot of us share, is that like sitting in a family member's lap and reading a book. It's a really special memory for a lot of us.
You know, I want to say something about that, because you mentioned that moment with parents and children, and as corny as this is going to sound, it's really true and sincere for me that when I'm writing these books, I'm thinking of that moment. I'm thinking that I've been invited into this incredibly intimate moment between a grown-up and a child, whether it's the person that's raising the child or a teacher, and that's so powerfully intimate and connected and private, and they've decided to invite me in through my story, and so I take it really seriously. For me, I want that to be a kind of a sacred moment, that I'm there with them, is a gift that they've given back to me.
Right.
So I really appreciate that. I would love to have that be the most important thing that I contribute.
Well, I think it's a great note to end this on. That's beautiful. So before we say goodbye, where can people find you online? What books you mentioned you have another book coming out. I know you have 2 books coming out. So where can we find you online? What are the books called? When can we expect them?
Okay. This is the hard part of it. I'm not really good at self-promoting, but I am online. I'm on Facebook at Alex Giardino, and on Twitter at Alex Giardino, and on Instagram. And I tend to be somebody who passes along information more than having the clever posts. I love sharing information with other writers, especially writers of color. So I try to build a community of sharing and passing along. But so you can find me there. And my books that are coming out, I have one next spring. It's called The Good Song, and it's about that song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, played by Israel Kamakawiweole. And it's very much like Ode to an Onion, where we imagine what lead is to sing that song and do it so beautifully. And then in the fall, I have a book coming out called Me Plus Tree. And it's about a young girl who has immigrated to a very big urban place, and she is in a playground, and she finds a tree stump, and she connects with this tree stump and tells it her story, and when she does, she brings the tree back to life.
Oh, awesome.
And it's a little bit of a nod to the end of the Giving Tree.
I was just thinking that,
it's very different from the Giving Tree, but we need to bring our stumps back to life. So those are my books coming out.
Awesome.
I hope you read them.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who commented and sent in questions. I saw Emily and Caitlin and Paula, and thank you to everybody who is watching this live, and people who will watch this when I post it online later today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much for joining us, and keep an eye on Tandem's social media, because I will be announcing our next interview soon, and we'll see you back next month. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.